What we're going to look at is the cost of cybercrime. So I'm going to scare you a little, what your legal obligations are, because there's been a lot of change in the last 12 months about how cybersecurity is deemed as responsible to the providers who hold information or somehow work with clients in some way to hold their information, like we all do, like a business station does. I do with my clients. We're going to look at the impact on insurance as well. So to make sure that your business insurance is or isn't covering issues with cybersecurity. And then I'm going to take you into three things that on their own are going to reduce your exposure risk by 95%. It's going to make it so much harder for hackers to get hold of you, so much harder for people to access your accounts, and so much harder for you to be one of the victims of cybercrime. And I'll tell you what, it is a massive problem. We're about to see just how massive a problem it is once we get into this, into the rest of this webinar. Thank you for joining us. I know we've just had another couple of people join in, so it looks like everyone's jumping in. This is actually probably the best booked webinar on cybersecurity I've ever had, which is saying something, because cybersecurity must be the most disappointingly boring thing you'd ever done. Now, I do have an attainment for cybersecurity through TAFE New South Wales, but done most of my study through business information systems in Sydney, University of New South Wales, Sydney, and then all my marketing stuff through Chartered Institute of Marketing, Facebook, and LinkedIn as well. Got a couple of businesses I'm working on. Startup Territory, my most recent business line. Clickstarter, my digital marketing agency. DanteStJames.com, my training agency, and Cellular One, which is my mobile phone and NBN reseller business. Yes, I sell NBN plans. A bit of a disclaimer here. Because cybersecurity is serious and boring, from now on, I'm going to lighten things up by adding a character from the Muppets on every single slide for the rest of this, as you'll see here. Now, I do have to also disclaim that the Muppets are owned by Walt Disney Company these days. I don't own these Muppet images. I didn't ask permission to use them in this presentation, and I will comply with any laws, takedown requests, and public whippings and drawing and quartering in the town square, as the Mouse House overlords may have to do with me. But as this is such a boring thing, I want to lighten it up and make it something that makes sense to those of us who are in small businesses. And we all are. That's why we're on here today. So let the Muppets begin. Part A. Now, the cost of cybercrime in Australia. Now, I know there's some of you just come in. I think someone's come in and needs to mute themselves. I'm just going to quickly mute everybody out from here. Thank you very much. Just so we don't get any strange slurping noises from coffee and whatnot. Now, the cost of cybercrime in Australia will probably shock you with just how expensive it is to our economy. It's $33 billion it cost us in 2021. $33 billion. I'm not talking about just downtime and productivity losses. I'm talking actual cash losses. $33 billion. That is a lot of money to be losing in such a way. So what we need to do is obviously address this, and the Australian government is probably leading the way in that, but all of our state and territory governments are also getting on board with this and making sure that education is available, and that we know that these losses need to be stemmed, because there's small businesses like yours are losing money. There's not just the big businesses. So at that $33 billion, imagine that the entire live music, recording industry, entertainment, cinemas, movies, live theatre, musicals, ballet, imagine all of that disappeared overnight from Australia, like it did during COVID, I suppose. That's how much was lost. $33 billion is about the size of those industries combined. So we're talking about one of the biggest industry segments in Australia suddenly just up and leaves and disappears. That's how much cybersecurity is costing us, which is, when you put it in those terms, that is a big impact. And it's such a big impact now that a lot of corporates are, at the point where they're thinking, well, do we even bother, trying to set up and fight this, or do we just pay fines when things go wrong? Pretty hard to do when there's 67,500 reported incidents in the last 12 months over this. And it looks like we're probably going to break that record again in 2022. Already in January, we've had the biggest January on record for cybersecurity incidents and cybersecurity problems and events. I don't know if you, like me, but you're always hearing about someone who's had their Facebook hacked or their Instagram hacked, in a conversation right now on Messenger with someone who lost their Instagram access access because someone got in through their email and was able to then take over their social properties through there. This is happening every day. 60 calls are happening every single day to the Australian Cybersecurity Centre in Canberra over this kind of stuff happening. So it's all doom and gloom. 75% of reports are about losing money or personal information. So people getting hold of your personal information or getting hold of your money, getting into things like your bank account details. It's absolutely awful. It's a train wreck out there. The average cost of someone successfully getting in through your email to your organization is about $50,000. That's across now big business, small business, medium business, the whole works. The impact of loss on a small business is much smaller than that, but the average cost over everyone is about 50 grand. That is shocking. You imagine that suddenly the $50,000 suddenly disappeared from your life. That for some of us is enough to send us to the wall. Some of us, we don't even have the $50,000 to begin with. So to have that lost, that's a very big problem to have. $50,000. Generating 22,000 calls to the Australian Cybersecurity Centre who are taking these over the years. So they've had to ramp up their call centres dramatically in the last 2 years. What we've been busy doing through the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission and Acsc has been taking down 7,700 websites in the last year. Just in the last year, over nearly 8,000 websites have had to be taken down, brought down, destroyed, and blocked in Australia because they were carrying off, cybersecurity fraud, banking fraud, all those kind of things, fake websites that are trying to collect your information. Then we look at the spread of it all. And whilst where I am in the Northern Territory, it's not that huge a deal. It's only 1%. We're only 1% of the population. So of course we only have 1% of it. But in Queensland, it's like punching way above its population rate at being the biggest place where cybersecurity issues are happening. One of the reasons for it is an aging population. It tends to be that a lot of those fraud and bank scams, phone scams, ATO scams are run through the areas where people can see through, say, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, where the biggest population centres are of aging or older Australians. So they think that are more likely to be victims of the kind of fraud that's going on. And they're kind of right. That kind of fraud definitely is happening in spades in that age group. Victoria, New South Wales, surprisingly, nowhere near as badly affected by this. A lot of that can be down to the New South Wales state government doing a lot of cybersecurity education on television, through schools as well. But you see that problems like, for instance, Western Australia, who has definitely less than 10% of the population of the country, definitely have a problem there. But Queensland, what's going on there, guys? What's happened? It's terrible. So, and we start to look then at the kind of fraud that's going on, the kind of cybersecurity that's going on. Most of it's, well, like a big chunk of it, 23% of it is what we call fraud. It's people pretending to be someone who they're not. It's emails pretending to be the Commonwealth Bank. It's emails pretending to be the ATO, the Australian Tax Office. It's someone pretending to be from Facebook or pretending to be from Google, trying to get hold of your personal details or trying to get hold of where your money happens to be. Some of it then is shopping. It's the second biggest area, and that's an online shopping scam. So that could be things through, Alibaba, AliExpress, a lot of foreign websites. I've actually been ripped off by buying a portable monitor for about $350 online. That was about 3 years ago. Still waiting for it to turn up. And the company I bought it for were advertised on Facebook. I thought that looked quite reputable, but it turns out they were just scamming and taking all that money from thousands and thousands of buyers. Now, that's, thankfully didn't get into the depths of my credit card details because it was done through PayPal. So there was, I was able to get the money back thanks to PayPal eventually, but it did take a little bit of fighting as well. Online banking scams are another area that's really big. Then you start to see right back into things like romance scams, where somebody pretending to be a Marine posted in Syria and starts, I think it was Casey Donovan who was scanned for that, and she was really ashamed and carried a lot of shame about that. And she only in the last 2 years has spoken out about having that sort of scam happen to her and what it did to her and and how much it cost her, both in money and in terms of emotional stuff as well. And there's tons of it, even stalking, malware, false donations going to places where they shouldn't be. But if you start to see the big ones, you start to recognize them: fake bank, fake ATO, fake people from Telstra, fake shopping opportunities, that kind of thing really starting to get there. And BEC, if you're wondering what that stands for, is business email. So it's like business email, basically. So people getting into businesses through their emails and then getting into their network and taking over a big area. And that's probably the one area that actually, whilst it's only 7% of the cases, it's probably about 30% of the value of what's going on, of what gets done there. So look, some of these things may not mean a thing to you. And when it comes to the kind of things you face as a business in your Gmail account, your Outlook account, whatever you're using, it's a matter of just looking out for things that just don't feel quite right. An Amazon package SMS that just doesn't feel right because you don't remember ordering it. It could be an email from the bank when you're going, the bank never emails me. I've never really ever got a reason for the bank to email me. It's watching for things that aren't regular, things that are kind of stand out. You go, why would they be contacting me? Why would they be the person who's coming to me with all these questions? And I would always say too, that there's always someone to turn to and ask. If you're not sure, there's no shame in asking for something. My parents do it all the time. They hop on Facebook messengers and they will screenshot something from their phone or from Facebook Messenger or from an email. They say, is this real? And I just look at it and go, yeah, no, that's definitely not real. Just get rid of that one, spam it out. So we've always got this check and balance between us. And you may have a business buddy, you may have a mentor, you may have your helper on the advisor on the digital solutions program, or it could be just me. Like, I don't really mind if someone sends me an email and says, hey, can you check to see if this actually is legit, because it just feels like it's not. You're better to be safe than be sorry. And there's lots of us out there who will not even think twice about you reaching out to us and saying, hey, do you think this looks wrong? I'd happily receive 20 of those a day and answer them, rather than have 20 people a day be scammed and losing, hundreds of thousands of dollars in their business money. So how the split goes on, about medium-sized businesses tend to be where the biggest lot of loss happens. It's nearly about $9,000 of loss, the average loss for a small business through cybersecurity. And this is when someone has been scammed in some way. But you think about that, $9,000. I don't have a spare $9,000 to just throw away to a cybersecurity scammer. And I doubt very much that you do either. So to think that there's people out there trying to take that away from you and just blatantly trying to rip you off, it kind of disgusts you. And that kind of outrage is warranted, because you've worked hard for this. You've done a lot of work, especially in small business where the hours are so long and the rewards sometimes feel so small. And to have someone come and steal $9,000 from under your nose just feels like it's a horrible way to go with your money. So you get it. It's bad for you, but how does it impact you specifically as a small business? What are the impacts that can go on? I'd like to probably begin with the fact that you do have legal obligations when it comes to cybersecurity, and most small businesses have no idea this is going on, because I don't know about you, but I don't always sit down there and read the cybersecurity bulletins from the Australian government when they come out. That's just, I don't understand half of what they mean sometimes, but there are some legal obligations you need to look at, and some court cases have made this quite a precedent lately. So Acsc, which is the guys who do your ABN, your business name registry and all that sort of thing, they can take legal action against businesses that fail to take what they call reasonable steps to protect personal and financial information from being stolen. So if I look at that in a real world situation, let's just say you're a coach. You're a like a personal coach, a life coach, helping people to empower themselves to get more out of their lives. You've got a lot of notes and you've got a lot of personal information to contact that person. You may even have their credit card in there for their regular renewals that happen, or you might be good and you have like a system that does that for you. But there's so many of them that just hold, files that are on a computer with the full credit card information in there. And that's such a common thing, particularly with those who work one-to-one or as sole traders or solopreneurs. So this reasonable steps means putting it in a system, using something like PayPal or Stripe to manage those payments so you don't hold any credit card information. So you never see the credit card information. So taking those kind of steps so it doesn't, and like Susan's just saying in the chat right now, do not hold credit card details. Absolutely. And you need to be PCI compliant, which means you need to be able to do that. This is no longer an excuse to have files sitting in an office full of these kinds of pieces of information. There's so many different systems that will do this now for you. So you don't have to hold those details in there. Now, if you're a business that's been doing that since day dot, you've been a mechanic, let's go Mike the mechanic who has been running this business for 40 years and this is the way you've always done it. That's still not an excuse. Now, the problem is though, Susan knows that this is the law now, but how many other small businesses would know that this is the law? They've always done it this way, or they've done it they just didn't know how else to do it because they haven't gotten any good advice from someone to make sure that they can be PCI compliant, and make sure that credit card details and financial information is not held in an insecure kind of way. So that's one place where you can be held accountable for data losses that happen and the access to your records from people who are not supposed to have access to those records. The ACCC, the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, they can take legal action against businesses that share personal and health-related information with third parties without consent. Now, there was a health information company that was basically like a research company. It was taking hold of a lot of survey results from people. Those survey results weren't anonymous. Those things are all linked to people with their name, their email address, and demographic information, as well as where they live, how to contact them, personally identifiable information. So that kind of stuff is so dangerous. So what was happening is that this company was then selling this to health insurance companies. And I think there's one health insurance company in particular who was buying this as one of the smaller ones. It wasn't one of the bigger ones like Bupa or HCF or something, a smaller one, was actually buying this information and then doing like comparisons with their database to start going, okay, if this person filled out here, they eat 2 burgers a week, they're at a high risk of heart problems. So we're going to have we've got the right stuff here to be able to whack up their premium. And whilst there's a lot of checks and balances in health insurance to make sure this does not happen, these guys tried to do it. They tried to pull that off. Now, whilst they got hit down by the ACCC and the Health Insurance Commission, the people who were gathering this information were done for about a $5 million fine. And that $5 million fine was all related to the fact that they were taking information, weren't keeping it in a particularly secure environment. It was basically on someone's PC that was on there in the office, and it was stored on a company server, which all the PCs in the office had free reign to go and read that research. And then they were also publishing some of that research out there. It might have been anonymized, but once outsiders like hackers know that there's anonymized information that's being released to the public, they then go, well, the non-anonymized information must be in that company. So let's try and get in there. In this particular case, the hackers didn't get in. It was a person who had been questioned by their health insurance company, that small company I was talking about, for what it was that their lifestyle things were, and saying, well, we've got a record here that blah, 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 that you did this. And they're like, this person was like, wait a minute, I've never had that conversation with you, but I know who I did have that conversation with, and that was supposed to be confidential. So then this blew up, $5.5 million lawsuit later, and a whole lot of people, a whole class action lawsuit happened for it. People got paid compensation. That company's now gone, obviously the research company, but these are things that can happen. You might think that these pieces of information you get about your customers are pieces, they're yours. They're all yours. Oh, that's my juicy data and my juicy database that I got here. But the reality is that personally identifying information about a client or a customer is actually their property, not yours. And it may sound really weird to you that that's the case, but it is. It actually belongs to them. So when you've got things like privacy policies, so through the Privacy Act of think it's 1988, which had an update in about 2003 with the National Privacy Principles. When all that came about, what it did is just let people know that actually, you have the right to ask any company if they hold information about you. If they do, you have the right to be able to ask them to give you that information that you hold on them. So if you've got juicy data and lots of notes from your receptionist saying about how rude that customer was and all that stuff, all that information is legally subpoenable. That can be brought out. And if you are shown to be making change to that on the way out, you can be charged for that. That can be regarded as, covering up evidence in a court of law. All sorts of things can go wrong for you. So the ACCC recently got some extra teeth to be able to chase this stuff down because it was happening so often. So this is another area where you've got to be responsible. It's doom and gloom, isn't it? We're just a little business. All I wanted to do is make a little money, have a little fun. And now I've got Kermit the Frog telling me that the Australian government's Office of Information Commissioner can take legal action against me for failing to prevent an attack. Wow, that's scary. So now what we're doing is facing the fact that if we have failed to prevent an outsider, a hacker, from getting into a customer's personal information during a cyber attack, that we are then held responsible. We can be fined. A small business can be fined. Any business can be fined. There used to be this idea that don't put a privacy policy on your website unless you make over $2 million or $4 million or $5 million. You got to have that on there. You've got to be, as a business owner, it is absolutely compulsory that you're across what privacy expectations are in Australia. I know that reading the Privacy Act of 1988 is probably the most boring thing you're going to do this year, but it's like the community standards of Facebook or like the content standards of YouTube. If you're going to play on someone else's turf, then you're going to have to know what the rules are. And it's like when you are, going to start a business, you're playing on the turf of the Australian government, who is ultimately responsible for the behavior incidents and things like fair trading and all that sort of thing. So that means we've got to understand what those rules are, because as you know, the ignorance of the law doesn't let you get away with it. If you didn't know that you're supposed to drive at no more than 40 kilometers an hour down that street and you did it at 110 and saying, oh, officer, I didn't know, I didn't see a sign. Ignorance does not actually get you out of the law. So you'll be finding that depending on the day, you may be used as an example if you pull forward, but by and large, people in small business are getting away with this stuff all the time because not because we're nasty or because we're bad or because we're not wanting to play by the rules, but we just don't know. And that's why I think programs like Digital Solutions or some of the other support programs for business in Australia are there to help to introduce these concepts to you. So well done, you, for actually taking a little bit of time out today to really see this and to see it as something that's rather than just a boring topic that no one really cares about, but actually getting some behind the scenes information and understanding that it is actually quite critical. And you may not know it's critical until someone's knocking at your door and saying, you're now being fined, $100,000 for not keeping data safe. So we're not going to go so much into data safety in this. We're going to more so go to you as a business owner, again, being in there, because at the moment, we want to protect you from having your stuff or your data somehow gotten hold of, or it's down to something as simple as, I would hate to see you lose access to your Facebook profile because you'll lose access to your Facebook page. And when you lose access to your Facebook page, you can't advertise on Facebook. All that stuff is unable to be done, not because Facebook's horrible, but it's basically, if you get hacked, it is, in the most horrible way saying it, it is actually your fault that you got hacked. I know you didn't go over and invite that hacker and say, hey, young hacker person, come over here and steal all my information. You're not doing that. What it is by not having the appropriate protections in place, you're essentially compliant in that problem happening. Now, big business is mostly who's being chased for this stuff right now, because this is where the big problems happen. These are the big businesses who are so large that they kind of forget that, oh yeah, this marketing activity we're doing may be not legal. So have a sip of my Pepsi. So what we've got to do is look at the, okay, if it's only aimed at big businesses now, is it always going to be that way? Right now, the attention is mostly on big business. But as Rolf, the piano playing Muppet right there says, There's an increased focus on small business that's increasing every year, not to catch you. Like the government's not out there saying, we're trying to catch you, we're trying to make your life misery. What they're doing is saying consumers are getting absolutely screwed when it comes to privacy. Small business are getting screwed when it comes to ransomware attacks, malware attacks, things that are locking up your business and unable to do anything. So what we have to do is, because people won't listen to the nice messages that come from people like me, because they won't listen to the TV ads that have been going for about 10 years about this kind of stuff, because people won't go and learn these things for themselves, we have to step in with regulation, with policing, and actually going, actually, you know what? If you get broken into and someone steals the data of these people and that gets reported, you're going to get in trouble and you're going to get fined. And sometimes, fines are the only thing that make us look. There's been, varied levels of success with fining and things like not using your mobile phone. I know in Queensland, when I was last in the Gold Coast and Brisbane, I remember being told that there's about 17 different mobile phone cameras going up the M1 motorway. Which means that if you get caught in one of those cameras, that's a $1,000 fine straight away. If you drive the length of the M1, that's 17 cameras, you'll get fined once for each time you are caught with your phone, playing with your phone, touching your phone, keeping your phone within hand's reach. You can get fined $17,000 for about like a 100-kilometer journey. The most expensive journey you'll probably ever take. $17,000 will get you a first class suite from Australia to London on Etihad or on Emirates Airways. That's the kind of money you're starting to look at. So it's a big impact. So there is an increased focus on small business coming. It's been communicated very clearly through the different cybersecurity agencies, particularly through the Acsc and through the Office of Information Commissioner. So you think, well, that's good. That's why I've got insurance. If I get sued, if I get fined, I've got insurance here. It's going to pay for it. Maybe. The problem is that not all insurance does it. Your public liability insurance doesn't cover that. Public liability is about personal injury and things happening where people fall over and hurt themselves. Now, a lot of businesses don't even have that. I have it through the cheapest way I could possibly find, which was through getting a membership with the Australian Computer Society, or ACS, and they give you public liability and professional indemnity insurance as part of your membership. So it works out around about $320 a year or something like that to be covered for all that in the kind of work that I do. Now, that doesn't mean you can join and get that, but it does mean that there are options out there. There's industry options out there for specific industries. You don't have to go to the market and go for very expensive public liability insurance. It tends to be those areas where you're more likely to have someone injured, but this has nothing to do with cybersecurity. This is not going to protect you at all. It's not even close. So then you go, well, I've got business contents insurance. Surely that sort of covers it because my computer is in my contents and so is my phone, and that's all part of it. No, doesn't cover it. Doesn't cover it. As Animal says, no. Animal also says no to general business insurance, which is probably a big package that tends to come from people like BizCover and like QBE, and some of those insurance, Aon have general business insurance cover as well. And that generally is sort of like a bit of a mishmash of public liability, contents and premises insurance, stock loss insurance, a big pack of insurance for your business. This doesn't cover cybersecurity incidents at all. The only one that comes close is probably this one, professional indemnity insurance. Now, this is where you're covered for losses that are as a result of your mistake. So if you're a consultant, if you're someone who's a coach and you're advising people on what to do, say in cybersecurity, or you're working with their data or working with their systems or computers and everything goes horribly wrong and their data's all lost, your professional indemnity insurance will cover client data loss, but not yours. Only your client's data loss, so the loss on their stuff that you were consulting to or you were working with. Professional indemnity insurance does not cover the loss of your database, doesn't cover people coming in, hacking your computer and taking away your access to Facebook and Google and all that. It's not going to cover any of that. The only one that really does is cybersecurity insurance. But that doesn't cover client loss. It only covers your own loss to your own data and security when it comes to electronic communications, email, all that sort of stuff, customer records, all those kind of things. So there is a cover for it, but that's only for your own data loss. So essentially what you'll probably need, and this is only general information, not advice. I'm certainly not a financial planner or an insurance broker, so I'm not qualified to give you insurance advice. I will say though that I have business contents insurance, public liability insurance, because I've now got an office. I need to pay for the contents of that. It's not mine, it's a landlord. So I've also got tenants insurance for that. I do also have professional indemnity insurance. So that and the public liability are through Australian Computer Society. So that's what my 300 and something dollars a year gets me. And then I've also got an extra add-on for cybersecurity insurance because I hold a lot of data about the clients that I'm working with. Business Station has data about you that's to do with your working with them. So cybersecurity insurance isn't always a necessary thing, but if you're working with other people's data, your professional indemnity insurance should be able to cover that. But by like all these things, please see a professional about this to get their opinion. I really love working with BizCover. I think they're fantastic for small businesses and new startups to give you a kind of a package that's going to work for you. And they never try to sell you something you don't need. They do quite like full questionnaires to make sure you're getting what you need, but you're not paying for the things that you don't. Some cybersecurity insurance kind of covers these. Now, this is a lot of words on the screen, and I'll give you their summary. It's basically they have incident response teams, like people you can call straight away, or people who can help out straight away. They've got access to, security professionals who can jump in and help you as part of your insurance cover. They have coverage for the loss of profit due to the interruptions that happen as a result from your system being down. So if you're Facebook got hacked and you're not making your usual $2,500 a day in sales because of that, then that can be covered as part of cybersecurity insurance. It also covers in the fines and penalties that come in as a result of you not maintaining your IT or maintaining your security a certain level that's going to keep your clients' data safe within your systems. Remember, this doesn't cover the work you've done on clients in their systems. It's only in your systems and the information you may hold that's going to cover. So again, see a professional about this sort of things. I'm not a professional in that. I tend to work with cybersecurity, and I can then advise people that certain insurances may be worth looking into, but by no means take my word alone. So we get to the crux of this. We get to the bit that you've actually really been waiting for. How do you reduce the risk down to like from 100% completely exposed to about 5% exposed. Now that 5% can still be nasty. You don't really want any sort of exposure risk, but the reality is, I don't know about you, I don't have a full IT team working for me to be able to do these things for me. And I don't have the patience to learn about it. In fact, I don't really care about learning about it. But what I do want to do is do everything I can to reduce that risk down. So your risk reduced by 95% comes from just certain areas. So 3 main areas that we're going to show. Now, this is on the advice of the Australian Cybersecurity Centre. They've got like what they call the Essential 8. And the Essential 8 is 8 things that you do to reduce significantly, and there's about a 98% chance of reducing the fact you'll ever be exposed in any kind of data breaches and that. Now, ultimately, hackers who really want to get into your stuff have ways of getting in the same way that you can build a Fort Knox structure around your house, and there's still a way for someone to get in if they really want to get in. The fact is, though, that most of this kind of work is done by computer programs, not by people. People write a script, or they write some kind of automated process that sends out emails in their hundreds of thousands and millions to lots of different people, particularly aiming at those who have an email address that's been exposed in a hacking incident. So, for instance, I've appeared in one of my email addresses in a hacking incident with Under Armour. I once had one of their apps, which was to do with my Garmin fitness tracker thing. Back when I actually cared about fitness, I had one of these things. So you're talking about 2015. In that, my email address and password was stolen, but weren't acted upon. Even up until a point where I was actually advised that this was an issue, where I found out myself through a third-party service that I was exposed in this big data breach. So this kind of data breaches are reported through to a lot of governments, such as the Australian government through the Acsc, and it's able to show them then that your email address is potentially involved in an exposure event. Now, if you use something like the Firefox browser, your email address associated with that Firefox browser account can be shown to, it will tell you when you've been exposed in a data breach. Another way to go is have I been pwned? And so it's like, have I been, it's going to type this out, ewned.com. So haveibeenpwned.com, it's putting that into the chat window for you. Check that out because that's a place where you can type in any one of your email addresses and will show you whether your email address has been exposed in a breach in the past. I've had them from, I had a breach from, I think it was Priceline Pharmacies through a membership scheme that they had. Another loyalty scheme came out as being hacked as well. I was in a like a credit check, one of the credit check agencies got really badly hacked as well. So sometimes it was personal information like phone number, but when you think about it, the hackers, if they want to get into an account, a bank account particularly, they don't have to know that much information about you. There's like a credit card number, they've probably stolen that, so they've got that. Okay, what's your date of birth? Easy to find online in a breach. Email address, and then you start getting things like, what's the first car you drove as one of those security questions. Oh, funny that they just picked that up off Facebook because everybody's answering these stupid memes that go on Facebook about, be honest, what's the first car you drove? Things like, did the first street you grew up on have a funny name? Share it below. Things like that are harvesting, basically make it easier for people to harvest this kind of information. Facebook can make it harder because they don't allow massive harvesting of information like they used to. But yeah, there's lots of them in there. And Helen's telling us, yep, Helen's been owned in Canva, Covey, and Spambot. So there's 3 areas which she's been owned. So that tells you then that someone out there has got information. They might not have your password, but they've at least got the email you use. If you don't have a hard to use password, then how to remember password, then it can take them less than 8 seconds to break that through a brute force piece of code that just says, try 10,000 different combinations until you get it right. Now, if a system that you're in doesn't have protection against that, and thankfully most do, they can just get straight in. Once they're in one thing, particularly or your email, that's where all these happen. Email is usually where it begins. If someone can get into your email, they can then own your social media and your Google accounts. They can own all sorts of parts of your life. So yeah, it's a really interesting thing to go and do a search to see if you've been owned or pwned, as they call it. It's like a old internet elite speak talk that we used to use back in the 90s. That's why you're seeing that in there. So continue on. Number 1. The first thing you need to do, update your devices, making sure that your Android phone is using the most recent version of Android, or better still, turn automatic updates on. Your iPhone, making sure that your iPhone has also got a situation where you've got those automatic profiles on. Your PC, make sure that every update that comes through from Microsoft for Windows is updated. I don't care if it's inconvenient. This is one of the main ways that people are able to insert things into your devices when you're on, unsecured networks like airport terminals, McDonald's, KFC, food courts in shopping centers, any shared stuff in hotels. Those systems are generally not very secure. So if you're on there, the chances are that someone else on there can search. Now, there's not a lot of people doing that. You're not going to go to the local Hilton stay for the weekend and someone's deliberately logging in there, unless there just happens to be some kid who's really into this kind of thing and has these kits that allow him to plug it into his computer and go sniffing around the network for vulnerabilities. You want those vulnerabilities to not be there. So having those devices updated is the number 1 way to help prevent intrusions that you don't see coming. So that will help you in an immense fashion. I cannot put it enough that updating your stuff is thoroughly important. I find that my parents tend to get in their late 70s, early 80s. My parents tend to be in a situation where they get lots of scammy kind of emails coming through. And I know that when they haven't updated their stuff, they get more coming through because something is sniffing around the internet and happens upon their computer and says, oh, this is running like a version of Windows from 4 years ago. And so I have to wait until I go and visit them. I do all their updates for them to make sure that they're then up to date. And then what happens for the next 3 months is that I get silence. There's no big problems. They're not asking me lots of questions. Then about 6 months in, if I haven't been keeping on top of their updates for them, it happens. Jennifer's just asked, what is the best way to have internet on a laptop whilst out and about? Is it possible to have a dongle rather than use Wi-Fi or personal hotspot? Personal hotspot's actually rather secure. If you've got a password on that, then they have to not only go and try to connect to that, but they have to have the password for it. And the way that mobile hotspots are set up, that you're not actually in a position where they can sniff across all your data in there. So I would use a hotspot on your mobile. It's the best way to do it. Dongles are great, but they're essentially the same thing. So you don't need to have that separately. I just really think that unless you've got a really good handle on your security on your computer, don't use free Wi-Fi anywhere. That said, like someone like me, I will, because I know exactly everything that's going on my computer. I know what's going on. I've locked it down to a point where I've got everything set so I can confidently use a public Wi-Fi service without feeling like I'm very vulnerable. But if I was to go to, say, a major conference where there's 2,000 people there and there's all these people on this network, I'd feel a little nervous about that. So I don't generally use it for that. And I'll use the, these days we've got so much data available through our devices and our networks. Like I don't know if you've ever come across this. It's a bit of a plug for a product I don't even sell, but there's a new telco provider called Felix, Felix, and they're owned by Vodafone. And they actually have unlimited data now on a no contract plan where you just buy the SIM, throw it in your phone, and it's gives you like something like, I think it's $30 a month, and you get unlimited data, like up to 20 megabits per second, which is like sort of at the lower end of what the NBN is. So that's phenomenal that you can have unlimited data on 4G on a mobile phone. You can basically just use that. If you're not someone who watches, tons of gaming or does tons of video stuff, it wouldn't even matter. You can watch video at 20 megabits per second. So I'd be going and getting that. I think that'd be a great idea. Great question, Jennifer. Thanks for asking. Number two. Well, number one, first, we've got to look at updating our laptop computers, mobile phones. Now, web servers. This is an interesting one. For those of you who are hosting your own websites on your own web hosting, you'd think that your web host would actually be on top of all this stuff. But if you've got a cheap web host, you're not necessarily on top of all this. Things like GoDaddy and not Dodo, who am I thinking of? GoDaddy and Crazy Domains are absolutely atrocious at updating. The unlimited data, Jennifer, that was Felix, Felix. It's through Vodafone. So if you live in the city, Vodafone's really great for it. It's across 4G, but not 5G, just 4G at the moment. So it's really bloody good. I think it's $30 a month and it's unlimited data. It's crazy, like a really cheap plan. So your web servers generally are handled really well by the web service providers. So, reputable web hosts like Adventure IP, Digital Pacific, A2 are pretty good with this. Bluehost, DreamHost, HostGator, another one, probably one of my favorites, SiteGround, are excellent with this. They keep everything up to date on their web servers. But if you're going with GoDaddy and you're going with Crazy Domains, remember that these really super cheap things, they come at a cost. And I've got a cheap one that I use as a test server, and they haven't updated their version of PHP in over a year, which means that they're running on an old version that's now not supported. So I've asked them to update that, and they said, oh yeah, we'll get around to it one day. And of course they don't. But updating things like the home assistants, the best thing, just set all these things in your preferences, go in there and just anything to do with system updates, set it to automatic. It's such a little thing to do, but it will make a big difference to your security. So back to number two, multi-factor authentication. So I'm not going to talk to you about passwords because that's like preaching to a choir that doesn't actually want to listen to you. Passwords, no one's ever going to do it. No one's ever going to do the right thing by passwords. Password managers are actually, I use LastPass, and it's been a life changer for me. LastPass has every single password of mine in it. I just use one very secure password that lets me access all my passwords, and no one will guess my passwords because it's 16 characters and I know it off by heart. I've got it hidden in a very specific place where if I forget about it, I can dig it up. It's literally in a place where I need to dig it up to go and get that. It's not even at my house. So it's in such a way, I'm so paranoid about it that it's somewhere where I can go dig it up. No one knows about it except my mum. And she will only know to dig it up if I tell her to go dig it up. So I'm very paranoid about this stuff. So because we can't win the war on passwords, we say, well, we need to go beyond the password, and multi-factor authentication does this. What is it? It's that example where you go to log into something and it says, okay, great, that's your password. Now get this verification code from your phone, or go to your email and get this verification code, or use the code that's on your verification app, like Google Authenticator, or Microsoft Authenticator, or LastPass Authenticator. There's lots and lots of them out there. So what multi-factor authentication comes in the form of is, yes, a second email account. Now, you do not want necessarily this as your primary way of having multi-factor authentication. It's like when I go to log in, it's going to send your email address and that verification. The reason why you don't want that is because what most hackings happen, and I'm talking about up to 97% of hackings, are done through your email account. So this is where people go, but doesn't Facebook try to protect you when you try to log in from a strange device? Yeah, it does. But if you haven't set it for multi-factor authentication beyond just verification through your email account, the email account has already been hacked by someone. So they're now getting the verification message that they can then use to log in and do whatever they want to do with your Facebook account. So what you want to do is have it at least on a mobile phone SMS. So you want to have that going through there. You don't want anything going through an email account. You want it going through mobile phone SMS at the very least. And the reason for that is it usually got that on you, not you. It's very unusual. Someone's actually stolen your phone and getting access to your stuff to get those kind of things. And no, that's a very targeted thing. That's someone who's really, really trying to get into your life into a very, very big way. If you're a multi-billionaire, you're going to be subjected to that stuff all the time. People are always trying to break into your stuff. But I'm gathering if you're on this program, you're not a multi-billionaire. So Miss Piggy will be happy with this. She's not going to karate chop you and give you a kick in her 6-inch stiletto heels, because you've been good and you've kept your business at a size that's not going to attract attention. So the mobile phone SMS verification is good. What is better is the Authenticator app. And the one I use is the Google Authenticator app, because you can now move it from phone to phone to phone. And I think that's a really safe way of using it, because that Authenticator can only work on, it's attached to one phone at a time. So you can get in there, but no one else can. Now, yes, if you lose that phone, you've got a bit of a problem, but there is now logins that allow you to transfer that across. Please, if you ever use Authenticator apps and you go and buy a new mobile phone, you need to have both phones working at the same time so you can transfer the information on one over to the other. Please do not just get rid of the mobile phone and then go, yay, I'm on a new mobile, and all of a sudden you can't log into anything because your Authenticator app hasn't been transferred over. So please, if you do take anything away from that, do make sure those things transfer across. Have backup multi-factor. You don't have to have it so it's just one thing. The Authenticator app, it can maybe go through your mobile phone SMS as well, and a second email account. On Facebook, you can actually nominate more than one email account to be your contact account. So if you don't really look at that email account much anymore, put in your work one, put in your personal one that comes to your phone. So you'll see those notifications when they come through that someone's trying to log into your app. So that's number 2. Not really hard to get your head around that one as a way to not do your head in every time you need to think about. I know it's annoying. I know when you need to log into something quickly in the morning and you get this verification thing, is like, oh, I've got to go to my email. Oh, I've got to go to the Authenticator app. That 10 seconds it's going to take you to get that authentication code is far less inconvenient than losing $9,000 from your business, right? Number 3, sound like a mum or a dad, scolding you. You got to do the right thing. Back up your data. Back up everything. Your photos. I lost 6 years worth of travel photos because I made the mistake of using Facebook as a repository for my photos. And when my Facebook was broken into in 2018, I lost access to all of it. My trip to America, my trip to Vanuatu, my trips to Bali, friends' birthdays, anniversaries, christenings, weddings, all sorts of stuff. None of those are my own, by the way, because no one's stupid enough to marry me. I'm too paranoid that they're trying to steal my logins. But it's all about losing all that stuff. Facebook is not a place to, it's not a repository for keeping your photos. Google Photos is great for that. OneDrive is great for that. Google Drive is great for that, but not Facebook. Facebook's not a good place for that. It's not secure enough. It's too easy for people to take from you. So make sure that if that's where you store everything, you back up your data, back up your photos. Otherwise, you could lose them. Your emails you can back up. Now, in something like Gmail or Outlook, the online version of Outlook, that's done for you. It's already handled for you. I think Google does an amazing job of that, but just got to make sure if you lose access to your Google account, that you got to know that where those things are. So even having a backup for that is really quite powerful. Your files, all the things that you think are receipts, all that sort of stuff should be in systems anyway. Things like Xero or Receipt Bank or HubDoc or any of those places. Using PCI compliant bookkeeping systems is great for all that. So you don't have to. It's all in the cloud. It's all safely taken care of there. They have the backups for you. But the one that you may have to check that if you don't have, if you're hosting your own website on, say, any of those website hosts, then you've got to make sure you back up your website, because you'll use a website system that does it for you. So Wix already does that for you. Squarespace does all that for you. Google Sites does that for you. Shopify does that for you. But WordPress, if you're using it on your own web server or someone built it on your own web server for you, Joomla, any of those, then you might have an issue if you don't back up your website. If the web host doesn't do it for you, you might have trouble getting it back if someone hacks your website. And let's say make a habit of every 6 months downloading your data from Facebook. In the privacy settings, you can download your data. It'll download all your information, your photos, every post you've ever had, every piece of information you've ever put into Facebook is downloadable from there. I do it once every 6 months. It's in my calendar. It reminds me to do it, and it takes me about 30 minutes, and then it's done for the 6 months. I've got that, as something which, having lost a lot of Facebook data before, I make sure that that's something I do. So that's your 3 things. That's your main things. That will give you a 95% reduction in the possibility of a cybersecurity breach impacting your business and costing you money. That's pretty amazing. 3 things that can do that much. And that will mean that all those automated bots are essentially blocked from ever being able to get into you. It's then only the very targeted personal attacks that have possibly got a chance. If someone goes and hires a hacker to go and hack you, and you specifically, this is where you might not have that extra 5% coverage. But for all the stuff, which is the most of it, the vast majority of it is just automated email crap, then you're covered for that. You're now protected from that. Australian Cybersecurity Centre essentially says, even by doing 2 of those recommendations, you're still covering yourself for around about 80% of all the things that happen in breaches. So doing 1 thing is good. Doing 2 things is great. Doing 3 things is phenomenal. You're going to be as covered as you possibly can be without having to go into a whole lot of problem. So with that, all that stuff, that's going to help you to protect it from being hacked in your email, from your profile on Facebook, your page on Facebook, your profile on Instagram being hacked and taken over, identity theft. That's going to stop that stuff happening to you. So you don't have to be super, super paranoid as I tend to be with these things, but to at least start to address that, it gives you a fighting chance to not do it. So what do you do if you are hacked? It may happen one day. Immediately change your password if you can on the thing you have been, and then change it on your email. So it doesn't matter whether it's Facebook or Instagram or something else that was hacked, go back and change your password on your email as well to block that person out from being able to further get into your life. Secondly, enable multi-factor authentication if you're still able to get into those accounts, right? Number 3, now you need to contact the provider. So you get in touch with facebook.com/hacked if you're being hacked on Facebook. Instagram's got a similar thing. Google's got a similar thing. LinkedIn's got a similar thing. All the systems have these kind of things that help you out with how to get away from being hacked. And then number 4, report it to the Acsc, the Australian Cybersecurity Centre. Now, they may not be able to stop it in its tracks. And a lot of the cases, if there's a loss of about $10,000 to your business from this, they're not going to be able to get that money back. It's already well and truly gone. But there is a chance that, if it was a particular kind of cybersecurity attack that's already being monitored, they can kind of stop that at the source. And there has been cases where millions of dollars have been clawed back from hackers through international agencies and partnerships with other crime fighters around the world, through Interpol and the various ACSC equivalents in America and in Europe and in Africa and Asia as well. So there's a big problem happening in the world with this, and a lot of the governments are now starting to work together better. And of course, go and check your accounts and systems to make sure they haven't got in anything else. So takeaways before we wrap up: they are going to come for you. So you might as well protect yourself the best way you possibly can without it taking over your life. A question from Malcolm: using a YubiKey or FIDO hardware token? I don't need to. I don't think, because I'm protecting myself in so many other ways. But I think YubiKeys are amazing. I think it's a really good hardware method to do that. But then all it really takes is for someone to steal that physical piece of hardware. It's like stealing your phone. Someone steals your phone, they get into your life. They steal your YubiKey, they'll get into your life as well. I've got fingerprint recognition on my laptop. Some have got like the retinal scans. I'll do an iris scan to do that with you. I think they're just as effective. YubiKey though, if you're really super paranoid, just do it, man. Just that you're never going to have a problem by doing that. I think adding an extra piece of protection on there can only enhance your security. You don't have to necessarily go to that length, but it's not going to hurt you to go to that length. Understand that you do have legal responsibilities. Understand that most insurance doesn't cover those things like fines. Make sure you update your devices, add multi-factor authentication, and back up your data. And when it does happen, or if it does happen, act quickly and report it. The quicker you can act, the more of a chance you have of being able to save your backside from all this.